Welcome to Comment with me, George Galloway, here on Press TV, still the voice of the voiceless. Comment is the big conversation. It's the great debate, but it can only be a debate if you join in. That's why, above all, I need your telephone calls on 44208-601-4555. You call us, we'll call you back, establish a clear line, and remember, if you get on the television with me, the volume on your television has to be down at 0. Or I'll have to press on because no one will understand either of us. You can also SMS the show on 447800008066, or you can email me at comment@presstv.co.uk. Tonight I'm asking, is the tide turning against the Israeli regime? And the signs are that it very definitely is. I interviewed earlier today the Right Honourable Sir Gerald Kaufman, PC, MP, one of the most senior British politicians, a Jewish man whose relatives were murdered in the Holocaust by the Nazis. And as he put it to me, my grandmother didn't die at Nazi hands in her bed in Poland to provide cover for the Israeli regime murdering other people's grandmothers in Palestine today. It was a powerful point, and one which is increasingly being made all around the civilized quarters of Western countries. I say civilized quarters because I'm currently excluding most of the governments. But wherever popular opinion can make itself felt, the tide is very definitely turning. Important pension funds, even in very pro-Zionist countries like the Netherlands, like Norway and others, are beginning to withdraw their pension funds from anything to do with what they call Israel. The boycott of Israeli products and services and academia and tourism is now well advanced, so well advanced that the Israeli newspaper Haaretz has predicted that if the current talks in Washington fail, as fail, of course, they will, just like all previous talks have failed, then Israel will be as isolated as apartheid South Africa was prior to its welcome demise. The SodaStream scandal that I spoke about recently, in which red-faced, red-handed Scarlett Johansson chose the money from SodaStream over justice and her position as an ambassador for Oxfam, has had predictable results. First of all, sales of SodaStream are collapsing all over Western countries, and the share price of SodaStream is tumbling fast. Like a stone, it's falling. So, popular opinion in the end will move. First, big funds, and then secondly, governments themselves. In the European Union, it is now a critical mass of unpopularity that the Israeli regime is facing. We knew privately what the leaders thought of that regime, and in particular, the hideously politically ugly Benjamin Netanyahu, because we heard the then French President Sarkozy talking to the American President Barack Obama when they thought the microphone wasn't switched on. And Sarkozy said in the south of France at a G8 meeting that he could not look at Netanyahu's face because the man, and I'm quoting him, was such a liar. You can't look at his face, said President Obama. I have to deal with this guy almost every day. Western leaders hate Netanyahu. Increasingly, they regard the Israeli regime as a yoke around their neck, or, as the head of the US Armed Services put it, a strategic liability. That critical mass is turning kinetically, a wheel which is going in the end to bring about the demise of the Zionist apartheid state. Of that, I am in absolutely no doubt. So we want your views, your suggestions, your examples of ways in which the tide is turning against the Israeli apartheid regime. And the second question that we're asking this evening is, why is the West still funding takfirism when it knows that that takfirism is a mortal threat not just to their own interests in the region, but to their own homelands? I speak from London. Not far from here is Crawley in Sussex, where it is said a son of Sussex, a child of a respectable Muslim family in a quiet Sussex town, just blew himself up driving a truck bomb which massacred tens of people in the last few days. He eviscerated whomsoever happened to be in the vicinity of his truck bomb, and of course eviscerated himself. There are many such fanatic extremists from Britain fighting in the so-called jihad in Syria. I say so-called because their struggle has nothing whatsoever to do with God. God can have no place for those who cut the heads and eat the hearts of other Muslims. God can have no place for those who destroy the holy places of worship of other minority religions. God surely has no place for those who have now moved on, like the Taliban before them, to the destruction of ancient artifacts. The cultural historical treasures of Syria are now being literally smashed to pieces by those who didn't draw the line at eating other human beings' hearts. So why would they draw the line at destroying the ancient treasures and beauty of Syria? One day, these takfiris, if they're not killed in this war, will return to the countries from whence they came. And one of them is ours. The British government knows this. I know this personally. The British government fears this. I know this personally. Why then are they still sending funds to the so-called Free Syrian Army, which is neither free nor Syrian nor even an army, since Al-Qaeda stole all their weapons, and I mean all their weapons except those that were in their hands at the time, and even many of those. The West is still funding, directly and indirectly, an increasingly Al-Qaeda dominated foreign military invasion force in Syria. As I told William Hague to his face, this policy is close to insanity. He didn't really have an answer. Mansour is on the line from Nottingham. Maybe he'll have an answer. Mansour, welcome to the show. Go ahead, sir.
Good evening, George.
And to you, brother. Go ahead.
Basically, I would just like to say on the situation in Syria with the militants, well, so-called militants, I don't see how they've labeled this as a jihad, George. In no way whatsoever is this a jihad. You cannot go fight a jihad with money taken from Zionist people, places like South...
And weapons, by the way. Did you see that, Mansour? That the Al-Qaeda weapons seized in Iraq and Syria came from Israel.
It all comes from Israel, and it all comes back to Israel at the end of the day, George. Everything that is happening in these regions, it is for Israel. And they are just using these dangerous, let me reiterate how dangerous these people are, these rebels in Syria. It's the same situation we had in Afghanistan, George, where they funded these people. And it came back to bite them in the end, didn't it?
You're bang on, Mansour. They didn't read Frankenstein, the novel, right to the end. Because if they had, they would know that the monster breaks free in the end. That's why it's called a monster. Mansour, thanks for the call. I'm going to Germany now. Eric's on the line on the same subject. Eric, welcome to the show.
Good evening, Mr. Galloway.
Good evening, sir. Go ahead.
Well, regarding Syria, in fact, you mentioned everything. I only would like to say that, to my humble opinion, there is no such thing called takfiri. That's ideology which the Saudis are using to apply the American policy. What is going on in Syria is nothing but American terrorism. They are resorting to terrorism to push ahead their agenda. They did it in Afghanistan and are doing it in Afghanistan. They did it in Somalia and are doing it in Somalia, in Yemen, and now also in Iraq. There is no such takfiri. These are people who are acting with the money and logistic organization of the Saudis, who themselves in turn are acting on behalf of the Americans.
Well, on that we're in agreement, Eric. But on the militants themselves, I'm afraid I have to differ. Nobody drives a truck bomb destined to turn them into dust, as well as anyone that they can reach with the bomb does it for money. These are people who have been misled. They have been led from the Sirata Mustaqim, led from the straight path, down an avenue which can only lead to death and destruction, bloodshed and terror and horror. But they have been misled ideologically and religiously by people who are taking their orders from elsewhere, from people who care nothing about Muslims of any kind. On that, you and I are in agreement. Ramzan's on the line in Wales. He's always worth hearing. Ramzan, welcome.
Hi there, good evening to you, George.
Good evening to you, sir. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, regarding Israel, right, okay? You're saying the tide is turning against Israel.
I feel it, Ramzan. I really feel it.
You feel it? Well, I don't really, because, I mean, one hand, it's all talk, George. You know yourself, for so many years, right, they've been saying, they're building all these apartments in the Palestinian land. It's only a talk of the British government and the European government and the American government, just to let the people know that we are saying something, right? Underneath, they are still giving them money. America is giving them $3 to $4 billion a year, right, to build these places for their own people of Israel, Palestinian land. So therefore, it's just a talk to get their public, so the public can be quiet. Oh, we are doing something. We are saying we are speaking against Israel, but they are not really. When they speak against Israel, why don't they cut off their funding? Right?
Well, I did make the point, Ramzan, that the tide is turning, but not yet turning the actions of government. But let me give you an example. The reason I was interviewing Sir Gerald Kaufman, MP, today was because of his speech last week in the House of Commons, in a special debate on the situation in Gaza. In the entire debate, lasting 3 hours, only one person spoke up for Israel, and he was the head of the Conservative Friends of Israel. Every other speaker condemned the actions of the Netanyahu regime and the settler apartheid state that they call Israel in withering terms. Whether they were conservative, Labour or Liberal Democrat, whether they were Jewish or Christian or neither or nothing, neither did they at any stage manage to find a single argument in defense of the crimes of the Israeli regime. That's the point I'm making. Now, you're right. At the end of the day, the debate came and it went, and the government ignored so far the parliamentary opinion. But I must tell you, Ramzan, I know about Parliament. I know my way around the parliamentary ring, as Mr. Warren is about to find out. I know my way around the parliamentary ring, and I'm telling you, as someone who was there when you could fit the supporters of the Palestinian cause into one committee room, never mind in the parliament as a whole, things are on the turn. Ramzan, I've got to go. Great call. Faisal's in London. I want to hear from him. Go ahead, Faisal. Faisal?
Yeah.
You're on the air, brother. Go ahead. It's all yours.
Hello.
Yes, hello to you. Go ahead.
Hello. Assalamu alaikum, George.
Walaikum salam, brother. Go on.
George, I'm just interested in finding why doesn't the West impose sanctions on Saudi Arabia and Qatar for supporting terrorism?
Because they're making too much money out of those aforementioned countries, especially the former. We sell scores of billions of pounds worth of weapons which then rust in the desert to the tyranny of Saudi Arabia. That's why, Faisal.
See, they go to all over to the Far East. They brought about this Wahhabism in there. They put brothers against sisters, sister against brothers, family. The traditional Islamic tradition is all broken up to pieces now. The worst thing that ever happened is they came to the Far East and spread this Wahhabism all over the Far East. And I come from a country from the Far East, and unfortunately, we are all suffering from this Wahhabism.
Faisal, good call, and I know very well what you're talking about. Ben is on the line in London on what they call Israel. Ben, welcome. Ben, you're on the air.
Okay, hello.
Yes, go ahead, sir.
Hi, George.
Yes, hello, you're on the air.
How are you doing? You're doing great, sir.
Thank you.
George, what price has the West paid for its support of the creation of the State of Israel? What is the price that we've paid?
Well, for a long time it was an asset, Ben. It kept the Arabs divided and weak. It acted as an advance guard for the imperial powers in the region. It was a fortress for the big powers that created it and sustained it. But its time has gone. The tide, I'm arguing, has turned. And what was a strategic asset for the imperial powers is now, as the head of the US Army put it, a strategic liability. We've lost Ben. Let's go to Ashraf then, in Manchester, on the same subject. Ashraf, welcome to the show. Go ahead.
Hello.
Yes, go on. You're on the air.
Yeah. Hi, George.
Hi there, sir. Go on.
Hi. Just a couple of comments. One in relation to Israel-Palestine. I'm not sure if you're aware, and forgive me, but European Union trade every year is on the increase with Israel. That's number one. And in relation to Syria, sadly, nobody seems to, especially we never hear it in our press, the sport that the horrible regime in Saudi Arabia and the Gulf Arabs that provide to all these terrorists throughout the world that are, killing innocent Muslims, Jews, Christians, blowing up churches, mosques, etc. We never hear about that in the press, in The Guardian or The Telegraph or on the BBC. It's very, very sad. I remember the comments I wanted to make, George.
Ashraf, the trade between settlements, illegal settlements, in the West Bank, as they call it, and the European Union is collapsing. It's collapsing very fast indeed. And the share price of SodaStream that I talked about a few minutes ago is testament to what happens when a conscientized public knows exactly where things are coming from and what's happening where those things are coming from. It's true that Israel's high technology exports and weapons exports are earning them more and more money. That's true. But the public does not make those purchases. It's governments, states that make those purchases. But it's nonetheless a good point that you've made. Let me go to John in France on the same subject. John, welcome to the show. John, you're on the air.
Hello.
Yes, go on.
It wants its cakes and it wants to eat it. It wants to keep the land that it's got, belongs to Palestine, and yet it keeps on talking about we want peace, and Palestine won't give us peace. Well, it's a nonsense, because anybody knows that unless you do the right thing, you're not going to get anywhere with peace. That's number one. Number two, the thing about whether or not the European Union is more acceptable to Palestine now, I suppose the answer to that is that you can fool some of the people some of the time, but not all the people all the time, and I suppose there's more people beginning to realise what I've just said. And that's all I've got to say, really.
Very well put, John, in France. Let me make this a point as clearly as you did. It's true that what they call Israel wants peace. The Boers in South Africa under apartheid wanted peace. The settlers in the north of Ireland wanted peace. But they weren't prepared to pay the price of peace. And the price of peace is justice. No justice, no peace. You don't need to be Professor Einstein to work that out. So all protestations of peace, the Indian occupation, for example, of Kashmir, the Indian government in New Delhi is constantly saying that it wants peace, but it won't pay the price of peace, which is justice for the people of occupied Kashmir. So all protestations for peace by these forces, some of them now defeated and gone and in the ash can of history, they can talk about peace, but now people know how hollow their protestations are. You can't claim to want peace whilst paving another people's land with illegal settlements and apartheid walls and military roads. You cannot Judaize the ancient, old, holy city of Jerusalem, driving out Christians and Muslims and precluding their entry even to pray in their holy places, and claim that you want peace. You can't regularly bombard from land, sea and air a captive population with nowhere to run and nowhere to hide and claim that you want peace. You can't roam around the world with other people's passports in your pocket, murdering your political opponents, and claim credibly that you want peace. The problem, John, in France is that nobody believes Israel any longer. Let me squeeze in Zachary in Aberdeen. Behave now, Zachary. Go ahead.
Claim credibly that you want peace.
Well, you'll need to turn your television down. That's a starter.
Hello?
Yes, go ahead. You're on the air.
Yes, sir. Mr. George Galloway, please let me to talk regarding Palestine, and then when I finish, then you can talk.
No, it depends what you say. Go ahead.
Yeah, okay then. So
depends what you say. Go ahead.
Economist called...
No, I've had many problems with you in the past, so it depends on what you say. Now get ahead and say it. Go ahead and say it.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
And I'll decide when you get stopped. Go on.
Yeah. Wilfred Pareto is the Italian economist that put a rule about 80-20 percentage to solve the problems of the world. 80% of the problems, you should solve 20% of the problems, and the 20% of the problems is Israel. And they have done the project in 1948 and given the land of the Palestine to these terrorists that call themselves Jewish. Then
No, I'm stopping you now. I'm stopping you now, as I've had to stop you many times before, and I don't know how you even got on this show. We don't talk in those terms. We're against Zionism. We're against the Israeli regime. We have nothing against Jewish people. I'll be back 3 minutes from now, God willing, with the second half. Welcome back to Comment with me, George Galloway, here on Press TV, still the voice of the voiceless. This is the big conversation. It's the great debate. For it to be a debate, I need your calls. You've got the numbers, you've got the SMS and the email address. We're discussing tonight the tide which may be turning against the Israeli regime. Certainly on the popular level and now on the institutional level, more and more of Western public opinion is distancing itself at least and moving into a posture of outright criticism and hostility at most against the Netanyahu gangster settler regime. And we're asking, why is the same West still funding Takfirism, even though they know that the Frankenstein monster they created in the 1980s in Afghanistan has already broken free and biting them most severely and has caused the deaths of thousands of Western people, even though the West brought them into existence and continues to fund them in Syria and to some extent also in neighbouring Iraq. Abdul is on the line from Durham in England on the subject of Israel. Abdul, go ahead.
Hello, George.
Yes,
thank
welcome.
you for having me on your show.
Welcome.
First, I'd like to mention about Scarlett Johansson. I mean, I, for one, was not surprised that she supported SodaStream instead of Oxfam and the Palestinians. And George, you must be fully aware that the media in the United States is controlled by the Zionists. And if she had gone against them, she does not have a career anymore. In, Hollywood, for example, the TV stations, even the radio stations, they're all controlled by the Zionists, and they're quite aggressive. Just like on Capitol Hill, AIPAC and the Zionists control, most of the senators and the congressmen. It's a similar situation.
Well, Abdul, the least of the reasons why she chose SodaStream over Oxfam and over Justice was her religion. A lot of foolish people are saying, well, what do you expect? She's Jewish. But Sir Gerald Kaufman is Jewish. And when you see my interview with him, you will shudder with the nobility, the dignity, and the power with which he denounces Israeli crimes. Scarlett Johansson believes in the prophets and how to get a bigger piece of them rather than the prophets. Peace be upon them. Secondly, you're just wrong about the control of the media in the United States if by Zionist you imply Jewish. Actually, the vast majority of the American media is controlled by non-Jews, and much of it is controlled by people who don't even like Jews. This is an important dichotomy that we have to constantly keep drawing in conversations like this one. The power in the world supports Zionism, not because it's Jewish, because it isn't Jewish, and much of it hates Jews. The power in the world supported Zionism because Zionism served its interests. And that's the dichotomy that we have to break. We have to make it clear to the power, and I believe it's beginning to dawn on them, that Israel is a strategic liability for you. Abdul, last word to you.
Yeah, thank you, George. Coming to Israel, yes, I agree with you that, the sun, as far as Israel is concerned, is past high noon. Because when it was formed, yes, it was the Second World War, all the kind of ex-servicemen went to help out, and the Arabs, they were illiterate and they couldn't fight and use sophisticated weapons. But things have changed. And even the Egyptian army, which was known for the speed with which they ran away from the battlefield, put on a good show in 1973. And last but not least, Hezbollah. They showed even the famed Golani Brigade, who ran away screaming like women, So things have improved. And looking at the European Crusades, they held Jerusalem for 88 years. And it was Richard the Lionheart who felt, this is not sustainable and decided, no, it's not worthwhile. And now we have all these armchair politicians and now we have the white American Anglo-Saxon fundamentalist Christian crusaders, It is their plan. They are the ones who are supporting Israel. So let's see how long they can hold Jerusalem. I agree with you. I don't think it'll be very long.
Are you in Durham or in Durban?
Durham.
You're in Durham. Okay, Abdul. I thought I'd spoken to you before in Durban.
Yeah,
it's a pleasure to talk to you now. Thanks very much for that call. Kashis is on the line from Australia, would you believe, where it's the middle of the night. He's in Sydney and wants to talk about both topics. And I think as he's come from so far, we should let him do so. Kashis, welcome.
Assalamu alaikum, George. How are you doing?
Walaikum salam. Nice to hear from you. Go on.
Yeah, I'd like to say a few things about the both topics. Firstly, I'd like to say that you're right there when you say Zionists are not Jewish. Yeah, a lot of Jewish people are here in Australia and they don't have any problem with Muslims or other nations. So, yeah. And the other thing is, yeah, you're right. Israel is going to see its end. And I think it's going through the phase similar to Sharon, who was on machines. He's in a coma, was in a coma. So I think Israel is going through that phase right now. So it can't live forever. So it's just living on borrowed time. So that's it. And
that's my view also. I think their time is running out, Kashis. The Zionist regime, as we have known it, will not survive many more decades. It's not going to happen next week or even next year. But I believe the tide has irrevocably turned against them.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah, and as for the Syrian rebels, I think they're similar to the Taliban. And as I come from Pakistan, I've seen that all. They're not humans.
Okay, Kashis, in Sydney, in Australia. Thanks for that call from down under. Got to press on. Aidan's in London. Always worth an argument with. Go ahead, Aidan. Aidan, you're on the air. Turn your TV down.
Hi, George.
Hi, how are you doing, brother? Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks for having back that short notice. I just wanted to speak about Israel. I completely agree with everything you say in regards to how public opinion is, the tide of public opinion is finally turning against them. And there is a lot greater awareness now amongst the Western populations as to what Israel is, what Israel is doing. And, well, it was the plight. It's now the wholesale suffering of Palestinian people. But whether that could actually transform into anything beyond public opinion, I mean, do they care that nobody likes them? Because I don't think they do. I think they actually like being hated, this Zionist regime. Because, look at Benjamin Netanyahu. When you see him, and I'm pretty sure this is generally across the board, whenever everyone sees that person on TV, hears him speak, it just generally upsets everyone. I mean, what do you think? I mean, what would you say about this? I mean,
well, I'll tell you, the best example, Aidan, I can give you. I, as you know, was one of the leaders of the anti-war movement in Britain. Undoubtedly, you were with us on the great marches and so on.
I remember it very well. That's how I first
millions of us marched, Aidan.
Yeah.
But we failed to stop the war. But when it came to the putative war on Syria just a couple of months ago, we saw how tide turns the wheel and how eventually that wheel turns the parliamentarians and how Parliament, with its wheel turning, forces the government to back down. That's how it works. That's how the political process works in countries like ours. It's slow, painfully slow, but the wheels grind exceedingly fine in the end. Aidan, good to talk to you. Not a great line, but a great call. Jabbar, are you there?
Hi.
Jabbar.
Do you have my voice?
Go ahead, you're on the air.
Okay. George, I'm going to speak about the international law. I'm an international lawyer. According to international responsibility of states, the thing that we observe about the crimes that, invisible crimes that
Oh, what a pity. An international lawyer about to tell us about international law. Jabbar from Iran wanted to talk about Syria. We'll try and get back to him. Unfortunately, that line was cut. We're talking tonight about the tide which I believe is turning against the Israeli regime. It's a tide which can be discerned amongst public opinion, amongst congressional opinion, amongst parliamentary opinion, amongst media opinion, at least when the microphones are off. No one moves to the side of Israel with love. All that do move to the side of Israel do so out of either duty or profit. No one loves Israel anymore. Now, you might think that is a silly thing to say. After all, why would anyone ever have loved them? But I'm not an old man, and I can tell you that when I began my work on the side of the Palestinian people, the overwhelming majority of people in Britain and in the United States did love Israel. They've been running down that bank balance ever since 1982 is the turning point, in my opinion, since they massacred the Palestinian refugees in the refugee camps of Sabra and Shatila. And each succeeding year ever since, then the balance of public opinion has been turning against the Israeli regime. I'm asking you for your view about that, how, if I'm right, we can accelerate the turning of that tide and how we can turn it kinetically into political change at the top in our countries. And I'm asking why the West is still funding the heart eaters and head choppers and culture and history wreckers of the Takfiri extremist fanatics who are destroying Syria in the context of the apparent incineration of an English boy driving a suicide truck in Syria, who reduced himself to ash and who killed tens of people, irrespective of who they were, just because he could. Why is Britain and the United States still funding this insanity? Let's see if a very wise man from Canada can enlighten us. He's Gary from Halifax in Nova Scotia. Gary, welcome to the show.
Good evening, George. How are you?
By the grace of God, I'm good. Go ahead, sir.
Well, I'm extremely happy you've put this topic this way, because I have an interesting personal experience to report that illuminates some other aspects of the matter that haven't been discussed yet. Yes, it's true the tide seems to have turned and is turning. But what the activists have to remember is that this is precisely the circumstance in which the fight gets a lot harder, gets a lot tougher.
Yep.
People have become steeled in earlier struggles. We just had a very successful local meeting on the topic of the recent crimes of the Zionists. We have very little problem usually organizing such meetings. We found a wonderful venue. It's popular. It's very near the university. And 2 hours before the meeting was to take place, they canceled. Now, it might have been true exactly what they told us. We don't know. But we managed to collect most of the people who wanted to come. We took them to a new venue very nearby. We had our meeting. It was very vigorous. People had lots of questions about the activities of the Canadian government and Stephen Harper regarding Israel, and so forth. But what we didn't expect was any serious after effect. And what happened very surprisingly less than a week later is someone complained about the meeting being held on the university campus and tried to create a problem for one of the organizers who happens to be on staff at the university, right out of the blue. So far, it hasn't gone any further. But that kind of backwash, that shows how desperate these people are. On a campus where anti-Zionist work has been very popular for a long time, we're very proud of having established what we call a Zionist-free zone in parts of that university campus. We call the university by its proper name, which is Colonial Money Laundering University, because that's actually how Dalhousie University in Halifax was established, by stealing money at an American customs house at the end of the War of 1812 and laundering it by investing it in the setting up of a colonial college for training British.
I think the statute of limitations has probably set in on that particular crime, Gary. 1511 is a long time ago. But let me pick up your point, and you're absolutely correct to make it. You see, when the Zionist regime was untouchable, could not be affected by our activities, they were, relatively speaking, tolerated with equanimity. Why should they worry about a few stray voices like ours? But now the existential threat to the existence of the apartheid state is vividly apparent to the apartheid state and its best friends around the world, who include very definitely the government of Canada, as you and I both know. So with their backs to the wall, you can be sure that all kinds of viciousness, all kinds of calumny, all kinds of dirty tricks will be played. But this is a sign of their weakness rather than a sign of their strength, as you, as a veteran campaigner, very well know. Gary in Canada, thank you. Mohammed's on the line in Ghana on Syria. Mohammed, welcome to the show. Go ahead.
Hello.
Yes, Mohammed, you're on the air. Go on.
Yeah, thank you.
Mohammed, you must turn your television down or I'll have to move on.
Yeah, I just only share to the... I only want to share to...
Go on, Mohammed.
Yeah, I want to only share to the American...
I'm sorry, I have to move on, Mohammed. And let that be a lesson to everyone. I don't say it every week for a joke. Don't come on the television with me with your television on, with the volume up. Because you see what happens. Mamadi's on the line, still in Africa, in Gambia. Let's talk to him about Syria. Mamadi, welcome to the show.
Hello, good evening, George.
Good evening, sir. Go on.
How are you?
By the grace of God, I'm good. Go ahead, sir. We're running out of time.
Yeah, what I'm just interested about is about the Israel and the Palestinians. Because as I know, Israel is all the time trying to occupy a Palestinian area. And the whole world is watching it, not saying anything concerning about it to my view. Because the actions they are taking against Syria and other countries, they are not using that to Israel. So what does Israel mean? Is it that Israel rule the whole world or what?
Mamadi, I'm terribly sorry. I didn't hear or at least grasp any of that. Maybe the viewers at home did, in which case that's fine. But I'll not be able to respond to what you said because I simply didn't hear it properly. I'm talking tonight about the British and American and French funding and the funding from Persian Gulf Arab countries who are paying for the mayhem and murder in Syria, why they're continuing to do it. I know why what they call Saudi Arabia continues to do it. I don't understand why British, American and French governments continue to do it, especially as I know that metaphorically speaking, their knees are knocking together at the prospect of the return of the fanatic extremist army that they have funded these last 3 years in Syria back to their own countries. That's just a mystery to me, and I simply am unable to elicit an answer. And we're talking about the tide, which I believe is turning against the Zionist apartheid state that they call Israel. Magoob is on the line. He's in Germany. wants to talk about that very subject. Mahgoub, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Good evening, George.
Good evening, sir. Go ahead.
Well, in fact, I would like to talk on the question of time is changing for the Zionist state, Israel.
Yeah.
But apparently, if one looks at the influence the Zionist has spread all over my continent, that means in Africa, with the population there, almost anything which connects, which has to do with the Zionist state, almost everybody there would support them. And when it comes to the question of who should back the Arabs to this particular continent, there are no chance for anybody to come up. And when one sees on any country behaving in that manner, you find the United Nations, the Security Council, rushing with the sanction, rushing with a lot of abuse and challenges, leading to, in fact, destroying the governments of these countries and their population. So far, up to now, nothing has ever been done to the Israeli state. So the question is, one wonders how the time is changing, because the impact, as far as we are concerned, we don't really actually see.
Well, I spoke in Berlin recently, Mahgoub, to the Association of Palestinian Doctors and Dentists.
Yes.
It was a huge audience in the capital of Germany. And there are many people working for Palestinian rights in Germany. But undoubtedly, of all the European Union countries, Germany will probably be the last to publicly declare its opposition to the crimes committed by the Zionist state against the Palestinian people, and indeed people of neighboring countries. And the reason for that is obvious. The reason for that is because the German Nazi state, within living memory, systematically, industrially set out to physically annihilate the entirety of the Jewish people in Germany and occupied Europe. And that sense of guilt is a particularly heavy weight in German politics. Let's squeeze one more in if we can. Ali Reza is in Iran. Go ahead, sir. You've got 1 minute.
Hello, George.
Go ahead, please.
You know that the foundation of Israel was on the basis of nihilism, and that has caused a variety of disaster in the Middle East, and especially for the Palestinian people. You know that the foundation of Israel was based on an illegal settlement by the occupiers of the lands of Palestine, and I hope that this regime ends as soon as possible.
Well, passes from the page of history. That's exactly what we're fighting for. And Ali Reza, it's coming yet. God willing, I'll be back next week. Until then, goodbye.
Hello, if you just comment the name and the question, you that number. And just make sure that your television volume's set to 0. So 0, 0. Can you spell your name for me? Yeah, I know. You redirect